Here, we will be discussing pregnancy and human development. Pregnancy are the events that occur from the time of fertilization until the infant is born. Here are some terminology you should know. Gestation period, which is the time it takes for the embryo to develop, it's approximately 280 days. The zygote, which is the fertilized oocyte, it's what you start out with and it's the cell of the new individual. The pre-embryo, which is the first 2 weeks after fertilization, embryo, which is weeks 3 through 8, and the fetus, from week 9 to birth. Fertilization is when the sperm joins egg to form the fertilized egg, the zygote. During fertilization is the transport of the sperm. During ejaculation, a man expels millions of sperm into the woman's vaginal canal. Before the process of fertilization, there are some barriers: acid in the vagina and mucus in the cervical canal. The vagina will think sperm are foreign invaders and automatically keep them out. Also, macrophages attack the sperm. Even though millions of sperm were expelled, only a few will make it up to the uterine tubes. After the sperm that passes the barriers, capacitation begins to happen. This is the process by which the membrane around the acrosomes are weakened and then gets ready to release enzymes. That process is called acrosomal reaction. The enzymes help the sperm break through the corona radiata and the zona pellucida. Both must be breached before the oocyte can be penetrated. Once the sperm gets in, completion of meiosis II happens. Now is when fertilization occurs. This is when two packages of DNA meet each other, male and female. Remember, only one sperm is allowed to penetrate an oocyte, ensuring monospermy. To make this happen, an electrical effect has to happen, which means calcium diffuses in and gives the egg a positive charge which repels the sperm. As a result of the release in calcium, there is a cortical reaction. When this happens, it destroys all sperm receptors, not allowing any more sperm to bind. The pre-embryonic development begins with cleavage and blastocyst formation. Cleavage is the rapid division without an increase in cellular size. The goal of cleavage is to produce small cells with a high surface-to-volume ratio, which enhances their uptake of nutrients and oxygen and the disposal of waste. It also serves as building blocks for constructing the embryo. Somewhere around day 4 or 5, blastocyst formation occurs. The blastocysts are fluid-filled hollow spheres composed of trophoblast cells and inner cell mass. Soon after the blastocysts form, trophoblast cells begin to take part in the placenta formation. The inner cell mass become embryonic disc, which forms the embryo, and that's going to become the baby. At day 6 is when implantation begins. Blastocyte searches for the right environment in the endometrium. Trophoblast cells are superficial to inner cell mass. They bind to the endometrium. This is where the secretion of digestive enzymes and growth factors are, and they bury into the endometrium. Trophoblasts then proliferate and form two layers, the cytotrophoblasts and the syncytiotrophoblasts. Blastocyst is buried within the endometrium as endometrial cells divide to seal it over. Trophoblast cells secrete HCG, which stimulates corpus luteum to keep secreting progesterone and estrogen. The trophoblast cells form choron, which continues secreting HCG. During the embryonic development, placentation occurs. This is the formation of the placenta. The cells from the original inner cell mass give rise to a larger of extraembryonic mesoderm that lines the inner surface of the trophoblast. Together, these become the choron. The choron develops choron villi, which are finger-like projections. They penetrate the uterus, and those become the blood vessels that bring nutrients to the baby. The maternal tissues form the decidua bacillus and the decidua capsularis. The decidua bacillus is part of the mom. It is the maternal part of the placenta also. It is immersed in mom's blood and transfers nutrients and oxygen to fetal blood. Together, the chorionic villi and the decidua bacillus form the placenta. Here are some functions of the placenta. They transfer nutrients, gas exchange, transfer metabolic waste, and hormones such as HCG, progesterone and estrogen, and relaxin. Relaxin happens at the end of pregnancy. It helps loosen up the ligaments in the hips to make them wider to help prepare for the baby to come out. The extraembryonic membranes that form during the first 2 to 3 weeks of development include the amino, yolk sac, allantois, and coron. Amino is the fluid-filled sac around developing embryo and fetus. Its function is to protect embryo from shock or physical trauma. It prevents fusions of tissues and helps maintain a constant temperature. The yolk sac forms to cells in digestive tract and is the source of the earliest blood cells and blood vessels. The yolk sac is the main source of nutrition for the embryo. Allantois is the small pocket at the end of the yolk sac. It forms the umbilical connection, then becomes part of the urinary bladder. The coron, as mentioned before, helps to form the placenta. During gastrulation is the forming the 3-layer embryo. During week 3, the 2-layered embryonic disc transforms into 3-layered embryo: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Ectoderm is the structures of the nervous system and skin epidermis. Endoderm forms the epithelial linings of the digestive, respiratory, and urogenital systems and associated glands. Mesoderm forms about everything else. In the development of fetal circulation, there's 2 umbilical arteries and 1 umbilical vein. Within the arteries, they come from the internal iliacs and travel to the mom. They are oxygen poor. With the vein, it carries oxygen-rich blood to the ductus venosus, which then connects into the IVC. All vascular shunts, such as ductus venosus, foramen ovale, and ductus arteriosus, are all closed during birth. At the end of embryonic period, all brain regions are present. First brain waves are in this brainstem, and liver starts to form blood cells. The limbs and digits are formed, and pretty much all other systems are at least started. Here we are going to look at fetal development. In the 3rd month, the retina of the eye are present. There are facial features, and you can determine the sex. In the 4th month, eyes and ears are assumed to be in the normal position, body growth starts to catch up to the head, and most of the bones are distinct. In month 5, lanugo is shown. Lanugo is the fine baby hair that covers the skin. Also, quickening occurs. That's when the mom can feel the baby move. Fetal is being positioned, and vertex caseosus, which is the cheesy secretion of sebaceous gland that covers the baby's body. During the 6th month, baby puts on weight. The 7th month, testes reach the scrotum in the males, and the 8th month, the lungs begin to mature. Month 9, the baby begins to put on more weight. Duration of pregnancy is about 38 weeks. It's from the time of ovulation to birth. There are some anatomical changes that happen to the female throughout her pregnancy. During pregnancy, the female reproductive organs become progressively vascular and engorged with blood. That leads to the vagina developing a purplish hue known as Chadwick's sign. Throughout pregnancy, there's a significant amount of uterine enlargement. The uterus ends up filling most of the pelvic cavity by 16 weeks. The rising levels of estrogen and progesterone cause the breast to enlarge and engorge with blood. The areola darken as well. As the baby is growing inside the mother, the increasing anterior bulkiness caused the woman to develop lordosis. That is an accentuated lumbar curvature. The placenta produces the hormone relaxin, as mentioned before, that causes pelvic ligaments and pubic symphysis to relax, widen, and become flexible to ease birth passage. As the placenta enlarges, it secretes HCG that works with estrogen and progesterone that stimulate maturation of the breast for lactation. It supports growth of the fetus and glucose-sparing effect in the mother. Besides anatomical changes, there are physiological changes as well. The In the respiratory system, there is an increase in tidal volume due to the mother's greater need for oxygen. The most dramatic changes happen in the cardiovascular system. Just like tidal volume, cardiac output increases by 35 to 40% at various stages of pregnancy. With this, it helps greater circulatory volume around the body. This is because blood will pool into the legs because it is hard to get through the baby. Blood volume increased by 45% because blood needs to supply for the baby as well. Fibrin increase is up to 40% during pregnancy to help clot after the baby leaves the body. Weeks before delivery, increased production of surfactant protein by the fetal lungs triggers inflammatory response in the cervix, stimulating softening and preparing for labor. Weeks before birth, the body slows down production of progesterone while increasing prostaglandins that softens the muscles and oxytocin that causes the muscles to contract. This causes contractions and they grow consistently stronger. The mucus plug, which is the collection of cervical mucus that sealed the cervix for 9 months, is expelled. Then the amniotic sac ruptures. The water has broken. Afterward, the cervix begins opening and thinning, as known as dilation and effacement. The body moves forward to stage 1, active phase. Stage 1 is also known as a dilation stage. This is from the time the labor's onset until the cervix is fully dilated to 10 centimeters. This stage is also the longest of the 3 stages. In stage 1, the body prepares to give birth. Usually the water breaks during the first stage. Stage 1 of labor has 2 phases, the early phase and the active phase. During the early phase, this is where the cervix begins to soften and dilate so the baby can pass through. Active phase happens when the cervix begins to dilate more quickly. Contractions get stronger, last longer, and occur more often. After dilation has reached 10 centimeters, pushing can start. In stage 2 of labor, the expulsion stage, the child is born. During this stage, an episiotomy happens to help reduce tissue tearing by making an incision to widen the vaginal orifice. The woman is encouraged to push to help move the baby down the vagina. Pushing can last anywhere from minutes to hours. Crowning then begins to happen when the head descends the vulva. Once this happens, the provider begins to help guide the baby out afterwards. Childbirth is finished once the baby is completely out of the vagina. Once the baby is delivered, the provider cuts and clamps the umbilical cord that was connected from the mother to the baby during pregnancy. The last stage of labor is the delivery of the placenta. The placenta provides food and oxygen to the baby from the mother. Once the umbilical cord is cut, the placenta has to come out. Compress uterine blood vessels, limit the bleeding, and shear the placenta off the uterine wall and is delivered. It's very important that all placental fragments are removed to prevent continued uterine bleeding after the birth or infections.